Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings upon each and every one here who sees this video. I'm creating this video to address Dr. Bill Warner. I come across this video today. It's titled Making Islamophobia a Crime by Dr. Bill Warner. And so I just want to go through it and listen to what he says. He proves himself to be an Islamophobe. There's no question about it. So before we go into the video, let's define what an Islamophobe is, or what Islamophobia is. I'm gonna share my screen, and Dr. Bill Warner is a known Islamophobe and a hate monger, and he runs the website Center for the Study of Political Islam. So I'm going to share my screen. There's Dr. Bill Warner right there in all his glory. And so what is Islamophobia? Let's define that. Islamophobia is an irrational fear or aversion to or discrimination against Islam or people who practice Islam. So let's listen to what Dr. Bill Warner has to say, and we'll talk about some things.
I stand for open questioning of authority. I stand for open questioning of authorities. I stand for honesty, fact-based reasoning, and debate. I oppose all censorship, including hate speech laws. I reject name-calling and insults. I am Bill Warner.
I'm going to stop right there. He says, I stand for honesty, fact-based reasoning, and debate. Well, his fact-based reasoning, so-called fact-based reasoning, is debatable within itself. Notice he says, I oppose all censorship, including hate speech laws. So obviously he's endorsing hate speech by rejecting the and opposing the censorship, and also including hate speech laws. So he's endorsing hate speech. He actually is a proponent for hate speech. And he says that I reject name-calling and insults. Well, Dr. Bill Warner, name-calling and insults are a part of hate speech. And so I question your so-called fact-based reasoning. It certainly is debatable. I have to agree with you on that. Let's proceed.
I finished reading a paper by the All-Party Parliamentary Group. It's a 72-page document, quite a document, and it's put out by members of Parliament in England. And the title of it is Islamophobia Defined. They say they bring in experts, lawyers, activists, and victim-led organizations, but they never call on the real experts, Muhammad and Allah. Now, you need to be warned that this work, they say, should be put into law, and when you understand what's in here, you'll see this is very scary.
He demonstrates right there that it's all very scary. He's a true Islamophobe. There's no question about it. Let's discuss something for a moment. Once again, the name of his website is Center for the Study of Political Islam. And so when you look up or you Google political Islam, well, lo and behold, who pops up? Dr. Bill Warner. And notice what it says. It says political Islam is a neologism used to label the wide-scale activities of individuals and organizations which advocate the transformation of both the state and the public. So what's a neologism? Let's look at that. It's a new word. It states that a neologism is a new word, usage or expression, and it says in psychology, a new word that is coined especially by a person affected with schizophrenia and is meaningless except to the coiner, and is typically a combination of two existing words or a shortening of a distortion of an existing word. So the Dr. Bill Warner is the one who has actually invented this term, political Islam, and it states, once again, it says that it's a new word that is coined especially by a person affected with what? Schizophrenia. So what is schizophrenia? It says it's a medical or mental issue, disorder, that is characterized by the disturbance in thought, such as delusions, perception, such as hallucinations, and behaviors such as disorganized speech and catatonic behavior, or by a loss of emotional responsiveness, which is going to be demonstrated in this video here, and extreme apathy. or by a noticeable deterioration in the level of functioning in everyday life. And it goes on to say, note, schizophrenia often involves an inability to orient oneself with reality, a withdrawal from social interactions, and what does it say? And a failure to integrate thoughts with emotions so that emotional expression is inappropriate. And it says there are several types, subtypes of schizophrenia, including paranoid schizophrenia, and those marked by catatonia. And anyway, so it goes on to say these people are contradictory or antagonistic. They have antagonistic qualities or attributes. And you'll see through the course of this video that the Dr. Bill Warner certainly does have these characteristics of someone who is a paranoid schizophrenic. He is an Islamophobe. He's going to prove that through the course of this video here. Let's listen to what he has to say.
A question which is not addressed in this document is, what is Islam? They talk about Islamophobia, but not Islam. What they do is to say that Islam is whatever Muslims say it is. And it's surely a religion and does not have any political words in it at all. The words Quran, Hadith.
Note that he has a problem with Muslims defining what Islam is. What he would rather have happen is he'd rather have non-Muslims such as himself define what Islam is instead of Muslims telling people what Islam is and telling people what Islam teaches. He'd rather non-Muslims explain to Muslims as well as other non-Muslims what it is that Muslims believe and what Islam is and what all these things, how Islam addresses humanity. So let's proceed with the video here.
Sunnah do not appear, nor does Muhammad. There's a reason for this, as we'll see in the end. They don't distinguish between Muslims and Islam. I'll give you the clue. Muslims are people and Islam is a doctrine. Here's an example of what they do. They say that 94% of British Muslims say that Islam is compatible with the British way of life. Now, how is Islam compatible with the British way of life? Let's take a piece of Islam and look at it.
Notice he states that in their research, they say that 94% of British Muslims say that Islam is compatible with the British way of life. Guess what? That's Sharia. Sharia mandates that the Muslim follows the laws of the land. Therefore, if you're a Muslim that's living in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our God, our Creator, then you must follow the laws of the land. Therefore, Islam, as long as the laws aren't forcing Muslims to worship some other god or forcing Muslims to drink or to do things that are against basically committing sin, then there's no problem with following the laws of the land. Matter of fact, Sharia mandates that you must follow the laws of the land. Okay, so let's listen to what he's got to say.
The Quran says that a wife can be beaten. The Hadith say that a wife can be beaten, and so does the Sharia. So Islam includes wife beating. Is wife beating part of British law? No. So then how is wife beating compatible with British law? Well, they say 94% of the Muslims say yes.
Okay, so
But Muhammad and the Quran say no. This is all about Muslimology, sociological study.
Okay, so if you notice what he said here is that he mentions wife beating, and so let's discuss something here for a moment. Nisa. This is what I've done here is I've gone to the Islam helpline.net, and I encourage anyone that Muslim or non-Muslim to utilize this site. What you're able to do is you're able to get the tafsir of each and every verse, and it's a very good website. And so we're going to discuss this verse, but I'm just going to go down and read what it states here in the tafsir of this verse. It says, in the case of family jars or disputes, 4 steps are mentioned to be taken in that order. It says, 1, perhaps verbal advice or admonition may be sufficient, and if not, sex relations may be suspended. And I'm going to stop there for a moment. You don't want to be in dispute with your spouse and then try to take advantage of them at the same time. That's a form of oppression. So you can't be in a dispute, but then when nighttime comes or whenever, you go to your wife or your husband for that matter, and try to demand sex from them. That's oppression. You cannot do that. It's better, of course, sometimes people do have make-up sex, and that's great. If both parties are in agreement to that, then that's not a problem. But if you try to come and just expect that your spouse is gonna, should have sex with you just because, well, that's not allowed. That's oppression, and that's not allowed in Islam. And so 3, it says, if this is not sufficient, some light physical correction may be administered, but Imam Shafi considers that this inadvisable, though permissible, and all authorities are unanimous in depreciating any sort of cruelty, even of the nagging kind, as mentioned in the next clause. If all this fails, a family council is recommended, and it goes on to say, it says, temper, nagging, sarcasm, speaking at each other in other people's presence, reverting to past faults, which should be forgiven and forgotten. All of this is forbidden. Once again, displaying your temper, nagging, sarcasm, speaking at each other in a negative way in the presence of other people, reverting to past faults, which should have already been forgiven and forgotten. All of this is forbidden. It goes on to say, and the reason given is characteristic of Islam. Alhamdulillah. It says, you must live all of your life in the presence of Allah, who is high above us, but who watches over us. And it goes on to say how petty and contemptible where our little squabbles appear in his presence. When I was studying this issue in Surah Nisa at Michigan University, it boils down to a situation where your wife is acting irrational. Let me give you an example. Right now it's Mardi Gras time. I'm in the city of Houston, and you see the downtown skyline behind me, alhamdulillah. But in Galveston, the Mardi Gras is taking place. So let's say you was at Mardi Gras. I don't recommend anyone go to the Mardi Gras because of the things that takes place there. That's what I'm going to mention. Let's say you went and your wife decides she's going to expose herself because she's trying to get some beads. Well, from a Muslim standpoint and Islamically, that would be an irrational act. She cannot do that. And so in that instance, when your wife or your husband, for that matter, is acting in a manner which is absolutely just detestable, then you can go to the individual, maybe wrap them up, pull the shirt down if you had to take them out of the area, but there's a stipulation involved. You cannot cause any physical pain to them, nor can you leave any mark or blemish. Okay, and so that's in the instance where someone is just acting, just being irrational, and you can't control them or whatever the case might be. But what does it say? That all the scholars agree that it's recommended that you don't put your hand on them at all. It's better if you don't have to do that. Forgiveness is always better. Alhamdulillah. So he's going to mention wife beating again here shortly. Let's listen to what he's got to say.
Beaten, and so does the Sharia. So Islam includes wife beating. Is wife beating part of British law? No. So then how is wife beating compatible with British law? Well, they say 94% of the Muslims say yes, but Muhammad and the Quran say no. This is all about Muslimology. It's a sociological study. And it's all about opinion, not facts.
Muslimology, he just made up a word. He's going to criticize someone later in the video regarding making up words. Dr. Bill Warner likes to make up words. He makes up the term political Islam, and he's obviously made up the word Muslimology. And if you have gone to Webster's dictionary, the word Muslimology, it says the word you've entered isn't in the dictionary. Dr. Bill Warner is making up words as we go and making up just terms, and he's trying to define Islam for Muslims and leading people astray by slandering Islam constantly in his hate speech.
This paper is one survey after another. and they see Islam purely as a social construct. This paper is filled with anecdotal sidebars of the suffering by Muslims, but there's no talk about the suffering of Kafirs. Now, they keep reminding us in this paper that they're not to limit free speech. We don't want to limit free speech, but here's how they plan to limit us. They say there's a principle of harm. Free speech cannot harm someone. Now here's the clue. Making Muslims feel uncomfortable is harm. Get it? So you can say anything you want, that's freedom of speech, but as long as a Muslim's not offended. Then they say, here's proof of bigotry. If you would not want your daughter to marry a Muslim, then you're a bigot. Now notice what they don't say. You understand the Sharia, and that Sharia includes wife beating for your daughter who marries a Muslim, sex on demand, kids stay with the Muslim if there's a divorce, and if you don't want this kind of Sharia.
Okay, so he just mentioned, he states that in the Sharia, that once again he says wife beating is allowed. No, it's not. And he says that the last thing that he mentioned was what did he say? Let me rewind it just for a moment. He says,
you understand the Sharia, and that Sharia includes wife beating for your daughter who marries a Muslim, sex on demand, kids.
Okay, sex on demand. For one, we already discussed the issue with the unruly wife or someone that's just being irrational. Okay, once again, you cannot leave any mark or any blemish on them, not even a scratch. You can't cause any physical pain. Okay, and but it's also unanimous amongst scholars that it's best to avoid any kind of physical confrontation or any kind of physical activity whatsoever. But he says sex on demand, that's a form of oppression. That's what I mentioned earlier in regards to if you're in a dispute with your wife, then it's one of the steps is that you don't have sexual relations with her. Okay, so there is no sex on demand in Islam. This man is being irrational and is being unreasonable in his explanation. He's taking things out of context, and that's why I said that his so-called fact-based reasoning is debatable. He's not using any fact-based reasoning. What he's doing is taking these little terms and he's trying to plant seeds of destruction and hate and trying to incite people to have a hatred and a fear of Islam, and it's irrational. What does it say that Islamophobia is? An irrational fear or aversion or discrimination against Islam or people who practice Islam. And that's what this man is doing in all these videos, and that's what he lives his life to do. As old as he is, and I'm not trying to be offensive, we're all going to grow old, inshallah, God willing. But what I'm saying is that a man of this age, if you take this man and you put him in the days of the slave trade, this man right here would have been a racist without question. He would have been a slave master. You put him in the 50s and the 60s, he would have been one opposing civil rights for blacks. Okay, he's got those characteristics, and let's let him speak for himself.
With the Muslims, there's a divorce, and if you don't want this kind of Sharia marriage, then you're a bigot.
Right there, he had just mentioned that that the kids go with the Muslim in the case of a divorce. Well, if a Muslim man marries a non-Muslim woman, then the children should come with the Muslim father so that he can give, be an example of, and share Islam with them and raise them to be Muslims. But it's also, matter of fact, let's look right here, Islam question and answer. You can go to the website islamqa.info, and it discusses this, and I'm going to read it. It says, one of the matters on which there is a scholarly consensus is that the woman is the more entitled to custody of the child as long as she is not, as long as the child has not reached the age of discernment, as the child at that age needs the kind of compassion and care that only a woman can give. But this right is forfeited if the woman remarries, because she will be distracted by her new husband from taking care of the child, and because there's conflict of interest between the child and the new husband. And so this is all logical. Okay, so if a Muslim if Muslims divorce, okay, it's recommended that the children go, especially if they're a younger age. They may be breastfeeding, there may be toddlers, there may be infants on their line. If they're not of an age where an age of maturity, then it's better for the child. And this is scholarly consensus. It's better for the child to remain with the mother, and the husband, the ex-husband, in that situation would be obligated to pay all of the expenses for the child. Okay, and so it is recommended in Islam, and it's a scholarly consensus, this is what it's taught, that you leave the children that are of a young age with the mother. But when they become a little more mature, and where the influence of other people may affect them, it's best for those children to be with the father in that situation, because as long as he's living in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's able to share Islam with the child, and it prevents the conflict of interest between a man and someone else's children. It causes a lot of issues at times, and there are situations where people can live peacefully in that situation, but it's better to avoid that if at all possible. Also, it's better for a man to raise his own children and try to instill the qualities that living in the obedience of Allah would that would be better to try to instill in the child. And if you leave someone else to raise your child, it's just simply logically that's not a good situation, especially if you're one that's truly obedient and you're trying to live the best life you can, and you want to demonstrate what true Islam is to your children. So it's all logical. Let's let Bill Warner finish his hate mongering.
An expert Muslim is brought in to say that Islamophobia is racist, and that's added to the definition. Why racist? It's a tortured logic. Islamophobes cause suffering, racism causes suffering, therefore Islamophobic is racist. I'm reminded of Humpty Dumpty and Through the Looking Glass. When I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. Islamophobia is about feeling. Facts are never the cause. No one has any rational reason to fear Islam. Jihad, wife-beating, assassination of critics, Sharia, killing apostates. No, you don't have a reason to fear Islam.
Notice he wouldn't mention all these things if he didn't have these fears within himself. And he's trying to propagate those fears and trying to push them on others. And so I want to mention something about apostasy, because this is an issue that many people don't know much about, including a lot of Muslims. For someone to be killed for apostasy in Islam, it is only during wartime. And this is a situation where the person who left the Muslim ranks would be basically doing acts of treason. He'd be giving up information about the Muslims, their arms, or their food supplies and things of that nature, or just spreading unnecessary slanderous things about the Muslims, but all in a situation where it's in wartime. Otherwise, let there be no compulsion of religion. People have the right to leave Islam if they want to. And if you notice that there's many ex-Muslims in the world, and are they being killed? Have you or anyone that you know witnessed any Muslims going to any non-Muslims and trying to force Islam on them, for one? Have you seen that? No, you haven't. Have you heard or seen any Muslims going to any non-Muslims and trying to kill them, or trying to harass them in any way? Absolutely not. It's all fear-mongering. This is all irrational. People are in fear of things that they haven't experienced for themselves, things that they've overheard by people like this that take things out of context and try to propagate hatred, and it's all evil. It's all acts of Satan. And so that's the reality of it. Let me see something right quick. Okay, the Quran on the death penalty. This is an article that was written by a writer by the name of Ashley Portero. And note what she says. She says the Quran on the death penalty. It says the Quran only specifically calls for the death penalty for two crimes. The first is for intentional murder. According to the verse, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 178, it says the family of the victim can either demand the perpetrator's death for the crime, which would be capital punishment here in the United States. And so that's a law of the land. That would be part of Sharia because it's a law of the land. Okay, or it says, or accept monetary compensation instead, or simply ask for forgiveness and just simply forgive the person. Okay, and so once again, this is a non-Muslim writing this article, but she's being accurate in what she's stating for the most part. It says the second crime punished by execution literally translates to spreading mischief in the land. So one who's left the Muslim ranks or in a time of war, she's not adding that, but it's in a time of war, so they're spreading mischief, basically betraying the Muslims or exposing the Muslim position or just simply just causing mischief in a situation where people are trying to live in peace and harmony, and maybe this person is just doing something just horrendous. Then that's it's a death penalty situation, but not simply for leaving Islam. That's a lie. That is not true. And look it up. I mean, go to true Islamic sources for this information. You'll see that there is no apostasy in Islam. If you're a Muslim that has this thinking, then you're thinking wrong. You need to seek knowledge. And if you're a non-Muslim, you've been misled. Okay, there is no killing for apostasy. If someone wants to leave Islam, then they're free to leave Islam. What good does it do to try to force someone to be on your team or to love you or to be a part of your family when they don't want to be there? It's not going to do you any good in the long run. So just let the people go, okay? And try to share Islam with them and try to bring them back if you can, peacefully, but not by coercion, not by compulsion. And so it says, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was recorded as saying, whosoever changes the religion, kill him. This is a statement that is often used to support the death penalty for Muslims who leave Islam. Once again, that's just a statement that people try to use against Islam, but she goes on to say, but other verses in the Hadith suggest changing one's religion alone is not enough to warrant execution. In fact, reports show that the penalty only applies to those who leave the faith and then are found to be working against the interest of the Islamic State. I don't like the use of the word Islamic State, but like I said before, in a situation where it's wartime, okay, I've studied the tafsir of all this issue at Michigan University, and you can look it all up. So if it's wartime and the person has left the faith, maybe they were never a Muslim to begin with, that might have been a spy, right? And then they've left the ranks, and otherwise you don't know if they're a spy or not, because they're no longer with you. Obviously their heart and their sincerity to your group wasn't there. And so it says it applies to those who leave the faith and then are found to be working against the interest of the Muslims. Okay, and so once again, that would be an act of treason, or being a spy, or trying to give up the Muslim position, or trying to plot and plan against the Muslims. That would be trying to create unrest in society. And so in that situation, then a person could be killed, but forgiveness is always best. Praise be to Allah. Let's listen to what Bill Warner has to say.
They give this definition: Islamophobia is rooted in racism that targets expression of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. I didn't know that Muslimness was a word, but it is now.
Right.
Now,
he's trying to be sarcastic.
Muslims means to bring
He's trying to be sarcastic about someone's using the word Muslimness, which is a silly word that's actually not a word. But he invented the word Muslimology that I tried to Google and look up on Merriam-Webster dictionary, that doesn't exist. So Bill Warner's just being a hypocrite, and he's being Bill Warner.
To the Islamophobes. They go further and say that all of the UK is Islamophobic. They even give a list of 12 kinds of Islamophobia. They say that the entire society is Islamophobic. Now they say a mark of Islamophobia is to say that all Muslims are the same. Who believes that? What we do need to know is that all Muslims believe in the same Islam. They go further and say that argument over free...
Now, notice what he said. He said that what they need to face, or whatever he said, that all Muslims believe in the same Islam. Well, if you're a Muslim and you believe in the oneness of our God, our Creator, and you believe that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the final prophet, and you believe in all the other prophets that were sent to mankind as messengers and warners and prophets, then indeed you do believe as we do as Muslims. But there's various groups within Islam. There's Shia, there's Sunni, there's, you know, the Qadarites, you know, the Salafis, and so his comments are just irrational. It makes no sense, and he's just simply being unreasonable. What he's trying to do is trying to categorize all Muslims and trying to say that Islam is eventually going to affect all Muslims and make all Muslims terrorists, right? That's what he's trying to get at. That Islam is teaching the fundamentals of being a terrorist, and that's just demonstrating that he is indeed one who has an irrational fear and aversion to Islam, and that does indeed make him an Islamophobe. No question about it. He admits it himself with his rhetoric about fear and all the things that he says in this video. Let's let him finish.
The speech is subtle racism. I guess that's what makes me a racist. And they say to say that Islam is not a race is a racist argument. Here's the summary. This document is purely subjective instead of being objective. Now, the word Islam is only rarely used, but Muslim is used in every paragraph. Muslims are without flaw, but they're always the victim. This whole paper is about victimology. You notice as you read it that everything that's right-wing is negative, but not one leftist organization is bad. All suffering and shortfalls in the UK are caused by Islamophobia. Nothing Muslims do is at fault. This is an elitist document that attempts to limit free speech while saying we don't want to limit free speech. This is all globalist elites talk. It's all about feelings, Muslims' feelings. They bring out one expert after another, but no Allah, no Muhammad. There's not one fact about Islam. So everyone gets free speech, but Muslims can never be offended. This is some form of pseudoscience that depends on surveys. Islam is said to be purely religious and without fault. The left is never bad, the right is never good. Now there's a lot of talk in here about the other, but it never mentions the supreme other, the kafir. This is a strategic totalitarian plan. They want to make Islamophobia a crime, and Islamophobia is anything you say that makes Muslims feel and get hurt. Facts are irrelevant. Blasphemy laws are being enforced by the state. Everyone in the UK is to become a dhimmi. This whole document is a vast lie. Only when I got to the end of this did I understand this. Out of the 21 members of parliament who are listed in this document, 14 of them are Muslim, 2/3 of them. Now, these Muslims know that Islam is the doctrine found in the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad. So why do they say it's whatever Muslims say it is? Simple. You get what you want. If you want Islam to be a jihadist outfit, you ask a jihadi Muslim. If you want Islam to be nice and peaceful, you ask a peaceful Muslim. So these people are able to shape Islam to be whatever they want it to be by rejecting the facts of Islam and instead saying it's all about feelings. Thank you.
I'm going to sum it up by reminding Dr. Bill Warner that 94% of the British Muslims said that Sharia is compatible with British law. He just made some comments. You just made some comments regarding the facts. Well, those are the facts, and what this amounts to is this man who is a hate monger and one who is prone to use hate speech is trying to define Islam for the Muslims themselves. And so instead of allowing the Muslims to define Islam, he wants to define Islam for himself. And so, let's look at the facts. The Pew Research Center says that 0.00065% of the Muslims in the world, close to 1.8 billion Muslims in the world today, 0.00065% are terrorists. That amounts to maybe 15 to 18,000 out of the close to 1.8 billion Muslims in the world today. That's less than 1% of those who call themselves Muslims. And so those are the facts, Bill Warner. Muslims are your police officers and your doctors and your professors and your teachers, firemen and your next door neighbor and the people at the supermarket and in the mall. You're around Muslims all of the time, and no Muslims are causing you any harm whatsoever. No one's coming to you trying to force Islam upon you. No one's trying to force Sharia upon you. No one's trying to make any big political moves. And so you're just simply being irrational, and you are a true hate monger, Dr. Bill Warner. And I officially challenge you to a controlled, moderated debate. And I leave everyone by saying Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings upon each and every one who hears or sees this video. I am Kenny Bomer. I am the author of the book, Consider Islam, Disproving the Patriots of Propaganda. And I thank you for watching this video. Please like the video, subscribe, and share. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah.